For decades, paleontology was a quiet, refined pursuit. Gentlemen in velvet armchairs examined solitary teeth and sketched polite diagrams on parchment. That civilized era was abruptly shattered by a few hundred pounds of black powder. Out in the American West of the 1870s, railroad crews and gold prospectors were blasting through untouched rock. In the process, they were exposing entire graveyards of massive, ancient creatures that defied imagination. Two men saw this unmapped frontier as their personal proving ground. First was Edward Drinker Cope. Born into Philadelphia wealth, Cope was a self-taught prodigy driven by impulsive instinct. Then there was Othniel Charles Marsh. Entrenched at Yale, Marsh was a cold, highly methodical academic. Because the field was so new, naming a single species granted its discoverer permanent priority in the academic record. Whoever claimed the bones first effectively controlled the narrative of prehistoric history. The battle didn't start in the Badlands. It began inside the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia. Cope had proudly unveiled his reconstruction of a massive marine reptile called an Elasmosaurus. But in his rush to publish, he made an anatomical blunder. He mounted the animal's skull onto the tip of its tail, rather than its long neck. Marsh noticed the mistake immediately. Instead of quietly informing his colleague, he pointed it out publicly. Mortified, Cope tried to buy every single printed copy of the scientific journal to hide the evidence. Marsh made sure everyone in the academic community knew about the blunder. By weaponizing a simple correction, he humiliated Cope, erasing any pretense of professional courtesy between them. Soon after, rumors of colossal bones started drifting eastward. The conflict immediately shifted from polite academic circles to the sun-baked Badlands of the West. Locations like Como Bluff, Wyoming, and Morrison, Colorado, were packed with enormous fossils. Cope and Marsh both realized they couldn't excavate it all themselves. They drained their personal fortunes, hiring massive competing gangs of hardened frontiersmen to dig for them. Finding bones quickly took a back seat to stopping the other guy. Foremen routinely bribed rival workers to defect. They intercepted private telegraph messages to pinpoint exactly where the opposing camp was digging. When one side actually managed to extract something valuable, the transport logistics became a liability. Hired muscle would swoop in and steal crates of packed dinosaur bones directly off the train platforms. The careful work of measuring strata and sketching site maps gave way to a race against the winter and the rival team. Paleontology became a logistical struggle of manpower and transport, governed by whoever had the most guns and the fastest wagons. While their crews fought in the dirt, Cope and Marsh opened a second front in the editorial rooms and lecture halls of the East Coast. Cope cultivated relationships with journalists and orchestrated a massive smear campaign in the New York Herald. He accused Marsh of gross financial mismanagement, a calculated move designed to strip Marsh of his vital federal funding. Marsh retaliated with surgical precision. Because Cope wrote at a frantic, impulsive pace, his papers were riddled with small errors. Marsh systematically dismantled Cope's publications, eagerly pointing out every single misclassification to the global scientific community. Digging up the largest dinosaur was no longer enough. The primary objective for both men was the complete financial and professional destruction of the other. Back in the quarries, the pressure from their bosses drove the field crews into severe paranoia. Crews genuinely feared that rival teams would sneak in overnight and steal whatever scraps were left. That paranoia eventually broke them. When Marsh's crews finished pulling the best pieces from a site, he issued a direct, unthinkable order: fill the exhausted quarries with black powder and dynamite. They ignited the charges. Countless fragments of irreplaceable, uncatalogued dinosaur fossils were deliberately pulverized into dust, purely to guarantee that Cope's men couldn't scavenge them. By the time the smoke cleared at sites like Como Bluff, years of evolutionary evidence had been reduced to rubble, simply because neither man would allow his rival a share of the credit. By the 1890s, the dust settled. The frenzied expeditions were over. Cope and Marsh were now aging, bitter men, trapped in dimly lit studies, surrounded by hundreds of unopened shipping crates they couldn't afford to process. Cope had completely drained his massive family fortune funding the war. To survive his final years, he was forced to sell off portions of his beloved fossil collection and rent out his own home. Marsh met a remarkably similar fate. Cope's relentless newspaper campaigns eventually caught the attention of Congress. Marsh's federal appropriations were sharply cut off, and he had to mortgage his sprawling estate just to avoid bankruptcy. It was a brutal zero-sum game. Through 15 years of bribery, sabotage, and slander, they had achieved their singular goal. They had successfully destroyed each other. Yet hiding within all that spite is a staggering volume of scientific data. Driven by sheer hatred and competition, the two men had frantically unearthed over 130 new species. They pulled Triceratops, Stegosaurus, and Diplodocus out of the ground and into the public consciousness. This vintage photograph shows the massive scale of their work. Today, when you walk into a natural history museum and look up at these towering skeletons, you are looking at the direct, tangible spoils of their feud. Cope and Marsh waged a bitter, localized war that cost them their fortunes, their friendships, and their professional dignity. But the collateral damage of that hostility built the modern world's understanding of prehistoric life.